Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the Disability Organizing Network this morning for our September webinar, Organizing Your Voter Education Forum. I'm very excited about today's webinar because we're going to be going through a lot of techniques to put on a good community organizing forum event around voting in the election this year. My name is Ted Jackson, and I am your webinar moderator for today. I'm also the Community Organizing Director at California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. If you experience any problems or have any questions, please email me at ted, that's T-E-D, at cfilc.org, or you can call me on my cell phone at 916-769-8821. Again, welcome to the Disability Organizing Network September 2014 webinar, Organizing Your Voter Education Forum. On this page we do have an image. It's the DO Network logo. And the DO Network, or Disability Organizing Network, organizes communities to build accessible communities where we live, work, learn, shop, play, and vote. Very important this year. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about today's presenters, and I'm really happy that we've got a couple of really wonderful presenters today. Our first presenter is Veda Florez, who's done a webinar and some other trainings with the Disability Organizing Network before. She's the Communications Outreach Coordinator for the Marin County Elections Department, and she's a board member of the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area. And I personally have experienced Veda doing outreach at farmers markets and things like that, and she does a great job, very thorough. Veda, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you very much. I'm just fine. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Great. I'm so glad to have you here joining us today. And then after Veda speaks, we'll have some Q&A, and then Dolores Tejada is going to be joining us. And Dolores is the community organizer at Community Resources for Independent Living. That's the Independent Living Center in Hayward, California. And they do some pretty advanced voting work, and so I'm very excited to hear her talk about the accessibility side of putting on a forum and how they engage the community in that. So I'm just going to run through today's agenda so we kind of all know where we fit in here, and then I'm going to hand things off to Veda to start the webinar. We're going to start off with how to arrange a candidate forum. That's the first section, and that's probably the longest section with Veda Florez, and then we will have question and answer time. After that, Dolores is going to join us, and for the next section, making your voter education event accessible for people with disabilities. Very, very important for our community. And one of the great things about making your event accessible is we really want to be modeling accessibility standards for candidates and campaigns and other folks in election fields. And then we'll have some question time after that. And then we're going to have some closing remarks from myself and to go over a few things, some important announcements from the Disability Organizing Network. All right, so please mute your phones and make sure that the talk button is unpressed on your webinar system. And just as a reminder again, please do not put your phone on hold. And Veda, I'm going to hand everything off to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Veda Florez, and I am a communications coordinator with the Elections Department for Marin County, California. I received my training from the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area and of the Marin County League to help put on these candidate forums. This PowerPoint presentation is meant to give you a few best practices to create a nonpartisan event. And that's one thing that the League of Women Voters is adamant about, is creating a nonpartisan event to let our viewers and attendees of our forum decide for themselves who they would like to vote for and have the opportunity to see each candidate and see which candidate puts the best foot forward. So here we will set the criteria well in advance, and we will create a no charge to the candidates debate where all the candidates are invited to attend. Next slide, please. And we have to decide what our goal is before we put on a forum. And this brings me to the question, what's the difference between a candidate debate and a forum? And a debate is traditional. Traditionally, we see debates and the candidates are standing in front of each other, they're facing each other, and they're talking to each other. They're not talking to the audience. That's the first difference. In a forum setting, the candidates are seated next to each other at a table, and they are looking out onto the audience or addressing a group of people. So that's the specific difference. A debate includes at least 2 candidates from the same race. So like a city council or a water district board, it's staged in a way that does not promote or advance one candidate over the other, and it allows the candidates to appear concurrently, so right next to each other, and then they're face-to-face confrontational style, where the candidates address each other. And a candidate forum is described in as a non-debate. Candidate forum is a non-debate. It's non-confrontational, it's friendly, and a lot of the candidates would prefer attending a forum rather than a debate. And the candidates are seated side by side. They're from the same race, such as a city council race or a water district board, and they are limited in the amount of time to answer a question. So that's one thing that we have to decide in advance if we want to give our candidates 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes to address the questions. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Excuse me. And the candidates address the audience and not each other. Now, the third opportunity that we have to create an event is something called a meet and greet. It's a gathering where we invite all the candidates from all the different races. So the Senate candidates are invited, City Council candidates, and the water districts are all invited, and they're all in the same room together. They're usually in a row or in a semicircle around the audience. And in this type of a setting, we usually have only 2 or 3 questions because it takes a long time for each of the candidates to answer the questions. So the same question would be posed to all the candidates. And at a meet and greet, you might have as many as 10 different candidates from, 5 different elections or 5 different races. And in a meet and greet, it's very friendly and very social, and not all the candidates have to show up. So in a city council race, and especially for our November race, we have what they call the top 2 candidates. So in June, we may have had 5 different candidates, and through that election, it boils down to just 2 per race. So in a meet and greet, you may only have 1 candidate from 1 race attend these events. So you really have to decide what your audience wants. Does your audience want to see all the candidates for the same race, or does your audience want to see all the candidates, or potentially all the candidates for all the races? So that's the difference between the 2. All right, next slide, please. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Keep those in mind. Jot them down on a piece of paper. And when Ted tells us it's question time, please let us know. The next thing we want to do is determine the date and time, and location of our event. So we've decided to hold a candidate forum where we want everyone from the same race to attend. It's better to look at your calendar at least 3 weeks in advance if you can, and set a time where your audience can attend. So if we want people who work during the daytime to attend an event, we won't hold it at 10 o'clock in the morning. It just makes sense. We'd want to hold it 6 o'clock at night or on the weekends. So that's big concern, and we want to make it convenient. You know, right now we have summertime lights, so if you hold something 6 to 8 p.m. or 7 to 8 p.m., people can get home safely. If this were a wintertime special election that happens in February, you'd be concerned that your people couldn't see in the dark, as it gets dark at 5 o'clock in January and February. And we also are concerned with the location. We want a location that's centrally located, that's accessible for everyone, that potentially has a well-lit parking parking lot, and we also have to find out if they need special insurance to rent the space. Many people can't afford that, so we'll have to, when we start looking around and you start talking to people, well, you have to ask them, do you charge extra money for insurance? Is the space free of charge, or is there a charge to use the room? So those are concerns that we have to think about in advance. Next slide, please. And there are arrangements to be made. So we've decided to hold a city council race, and we have to find out who the candidates are. So the best place to do that is go to your elections office. So here in Marin, we go to the Marin Civic Center, go to the elections office or call them up and say, do you have a list of candidates that are running for the city council race? Do you have any of their contact information that you can share with me? I'm thinking, I'm from the DO network and I'm thinking of holding a candidate forum. Do you mind sharing that information? So you receive the information, and the next thing to do is to find the candidate's website. This is especially important when you're making table tents with their names on them. That's a little piece of paper that's folded in half to look like a tent. So we type their name on it so that the audience can identify who the candidates are. And it's best to visit their website to find out how to spell their name and find out some information on any issues that they may cover for your community. Next slide, please. Okay, the initial call. This is very important. So sometimes on the paperwork that the election office has, you will receive information from the incumbent. Now the incumbent is the person or the candidate who's holding the office currently. So they want to be reelected into the position. So they are the incumbent. They're in office already. So when you call their office, you have to find out, make sure and find out, is it the staff organizer or is it the campaign organizer? So if you want your current city council member to come and do a ribbon cutting for the local TV station, you would call the staff coordinator. But if you want to have the candidate, incumbent candidate who's running for city council, attend your candidate debate, you would contact the campaign organizer. So just know the difference between those two. It helps cut through a lot of paperwork down the line. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, now calling the candidates. So you want to have one or two people help you organize your candidate forum. So you'll sit down together and you'll determine your date, your time, your location, and you'll also determine if it's a better place for people to park. You'll figure out all these logistics before you call the candidates. And the best thing to do is call the candidates and have a script in front of you so you don't get off track. Usually the candidates and their staff are very busy. They don't have a lot of time. They want you to get to the point. So it's better to have a written script written down, of course. Something that says, hello, my name is Veda, and I'm calling from the DO network. I would like to hold a candidate forum. Am I speaking to the right person? And they'll say, no, you've got the wrong number. Please call the campaign scheduler. You'll do that, write down the number, call them up. Hello, my name is Veda. I'm from the DO network, and I'd like to hold a candidate forum. Am I speaking to the right person? And they'll say, why, yes, I'm the person who will make this happen for you. Next, you'll say, we're inviting all the candidates for City Council to a nonpartisan event. Make sure that they know that, because they don't want to be set up at the Democratic caucus. You don't want your Republican candidate to be surprised, hello, amongst all the Democrats. So make sure and mention this is a nonpartisan event. You'll go on to say, I want to invite candidate Roosevelt, who's running for city council, to attend a candidate debate or candidate forum, pardon me, on September the 22nd at 7 p.m. and this will be located at the community center downtown. And then you'll say, please arrive a half hour before the event so that we can seat him and take photographs. That's one thing you'll want to do. Have your media person take photographs of everything that goes on, because this is great for your Facebook page. And it will help the community identify each candidate. Oh, I thought candidate Roosevelt was much older. No, he's a young guy. See the photograph from the Do Network? Next slide, please. So after we've called our candidates and they've agreed to attend, it's time to walk through the space. So take a friend, don't walk through by yourself. Make sure you get someone's opinion on attending on a great space. You may think it's great, but then your partner, your coworker may not think it's so great. So when you see the initial space, take a photograph of the outside so people will know if it's accessible. Take a picture of the inside when you first arrive. Carry a pen and paper with you so you can take down notes. You're talking to the space organizer, so you can find out who's the emergency contact. May I have your phone number if anything goes wrong? Will you be here the day of the event? And is there anything else I need to know? Make sure and write that down. Is there anything else I need to know about this space? Next slide, please. And here's some questions for your location coordinator. You know, what happens if it gets too hot or too cold? Can you show me where the thermostat is? Do I need a special key to get into the thermostat? Is it okay for me to adjust the thermostat, or do I have to find the person on site, someone on site, to adjust these? What's included in my reservation? Will I have a lighting engineer? Will there someone special be here? Will there be someone special here to adjust the lighting, or can you show me where the light switches are? Generally, when you first arrive at an event space, they'll turn the lights on. But as you walk to the restrooms, there may not be a light in the hallway. So that's why it's important to find out where the light switches are. Is there a sound engineer included in this? Will I need microphones? In your experience, here's a great question for you. In your experience, have you noticed that speakers need microphones? Well, if not, then you're okay. Here's another great question. Do you have microphones for us to use? And can you show me where to plug them in? You know, do I need to rent microphones? What's your experience? You know, these people have rented out this space a number of times, and they're happy to work with you in any way they can. So just remember, temperature, hot and cold, what's included in the reservation, sound and lighting. Also remember, are the tables and chairs complimentary? Do you have them here, or are they stored across the corridor? If there's no tables and chairs, perhaps you can partner with other organizations, you know, other people who have a like-minded idea to attend a forum, and ask them to supply the chairs. Or you might ask the coordinator, you know, where can I get some chairs for free? What's your experience? Next slide, please. So once we've decided all the details and we're ready to set up the space, we really want to make it comfortable and convenient for the candidates. So we'll want to have tables and chairs. If you have a covering for the table, that's even better. Name tags, or what we call table tents, just writing their name on a piece of paper, folding it in half so it stands like a tent, is great for the audience. Make sure and have a bottle of water for them so they're comfortable. Make sure the space is well lit and it's cool. You know, if a candidate is sitting in front of a room with hot lights, they make it hot. So make sure and have a fan next to the table so it just circulates the air a little bit. And this is the next item is something I found out when I held my first candidate debate, that the candidate never comes alone. He's always with his entourage. And of course, the first thing they want to do is put a brochure in everyone's hand. The best thing to do is have a table at the back of the room where they can display their literature. And make sure and tell them that you've got half of this table to put your literature, so please allow the second candidate to have the rest of the table if you've only got one table, because they will take up the space and make it look like the event was created for them if you allow them to. Next slide, please. Okay, how to do it. So we've got everything arranged and we're ready to seat our candidates. Make sure and seat them in alphabetical order. We don't want to give an unfair advantage to the incumbent. This is usually what happens. So on the table tent, you'll just write their name. John Roosevelt, Democrat. You don't even have to put Democrat, just John Roosevelt. And you don't, many candidates forums put their job description. John Roosevelt, real estate agent. So you don't have to do that at all if you don't want to. All you need is their name legible in front of them. Make sure and explain the format to the candidate before it begins. Say something like, our forum will last an hour and 10 minutes. We have written questions for you, and you have 2 minutes to answer each question. Do you see our timekeeper in front of you? And this brings us to a very interesting area. Should I write the questions in advance, have them prepared, or should I take questions from the audience? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So I like to see if our candidates are prepared, and so I don't give the candidates the questions in advance. I don't want them to have canned answers. I want to see how they answer questions on their feet, you know, if they can think through the process, look at our audience in the eyes, and, you know, see if they're prepared in advance. So I don't give the questions to my candidates in advance, but that's up to you. Next slide, please. And here we are talking about the difference between receiving questions from the audience or having them written in advance. So when you get questions in the audience, you want to make sure you have an audience. What happens if you only have 5 people show up? They may not be able to generate enough questions. So if you're taking questions from the audience, you want to have a few in advance, so that you can start on time. Sometimes it takes people a few minutes to start thinking about, oh, I can ask them a question. Well, let me think about that for a moment. So you want to have a few questions ready in advance, even if you're asking the audience for questions. So one advantage is that it's non-scripted. The viewers participate. You know, they feel like they are invested in the event that night. So if you are taking questions from the audience, you'll need to have cards and pens. You'll need to have someone who'll pick up the questions. You'll need to give the questions to a sorter who can read the questions and make sure it's a question and not just a comment or someone, a disgruntled resident who wants to, you know, bark at the candidates. You want to make sure that your questions are indeed a question. And that's where your question sorter, and you want the smartest person in the room to help sort these questions out and make sure they're written properly for the candidates to understand. And the question sorter will then take them to the moderator for the moderator to read. And the moderator will look at the questions sort of at the same time while they're listening to the candidates answer questions and put them in the specific order. Because if 5 people are asking a question on housing, you don't want to answer all 5 of them. Your question sorter will condense those into one question, and your moderator will ask the housing question after the transportation question. So they'll put those in proper order. So when we have our written questions in advance, we can arrange a broad spectrum, hard to say this morning, a broad spectrum of questions, and they can be balanced. So not the same 5 housing questions. So you can look at those in advance, run them through a board of directors or a group of organizers so that you can all agree on the kind of questions. So we'll also want to throw out the dumb questions, allow the moderator to relax a little bit and just interact with the candidates. And if you need help with written questions, the League of Women Voters is great for that. They can help you put together your questions in any order you want. Next slide, please. So now that we've determined if we're taking questions from the audience or having them written in advance, we have to talk a little bit about how we ask our questions. So we have the candidates seated in alphabetical order. For this November election, there'll only be 2 candidates except for your local city council or water district. Some of those races might have multiple candidates, but for the most part, it'll be just 2 candidates. So they're seated in alphabetical order. The first question, as you can see from this slide, we have candidate Allen and candidate Levine. The first question goes to candidate Allen, and then Levine will answer it. The second question is started by candidate Levine and then answered by candidate Allen. And then we reverse that again. Question 3 is asked to candidate Allen and then candidate Levine, so that you're bouncing back and forth, taking turns. And this makes it a little bit more fair. Make sure that your timekeeper is positioned right in front of the candidates in the front row. The timekeeper will have a stopwatch. Generally, I like to ask my candidates to make their answers in 2-minute blocks. I've used 3 minutes before, but I've experienced an opportunity where the candidates will veer off onto another subject. It's like they don't know the depth of their question and can't answer it, so they'll guide you somewhere else, or they just waste the time talking about the other candidate in a mean-spirited fashion. So I think that 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes is the perfect length to ask questions to your candidates. Your timekeeper, as long as we're here talking about our timekeeper will have their stopwatch for 2 minutes. They will also have 3 different cards in their hand. One that says stop, your time is up. The timekeeper holds up the stop card. The timekeeper also has something that says 1 minute. 1 minute, you've used 1 minute, you've got 1 minute left. And there's also another card that's 30 seconds. So 30 seconds, I'm sorry, you've only got 30 seconds. We'll ask the timekeeper to hold up the cards until they can get a nod or a visual that the candidate has seen that time and they're aware that they've only got 30 seconds left. Okay, next slide, please. How much time do I need? This is always the biggest question. When we set up our candidate forum, we want to make sure that people know this is going to last about 1.5 hours. And we'll try to start on time, but what if a candidate's late? So plan 1.5 hours for your candidate forum. We usually allow 1 minute for the timekeeper to ask the question. We allow 2 minutes per candidate per question. So if we have 2 candidates, that would mean 4 minutes. And then we allow an extra minute just for whatever. So figure 6 minutes per question. So if you're asking 4 or 5 questions, you can do the math. 4 or 5 times 6. I allow 5 minutes for opening and closing remarks, 5 minutes each. 5 minutes for opening remarks. A lot of people like to have the American flag there and everyone stands up to say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's fun. Also, you want to have closing remarks. Someone says, you've still got the opportunity to sign up if you've moved in the last year. You want to update your voter registration. We've got cards in the back of the room. There's literature for the candidates in the back of the room. If you have any questions, you can speak to someone on staff. So I allow 5 minutes for opening, another 5 minutes for closing remarks. So I generally figure 64 minutes for the event, or I give a little play 1 hour and 10 minutes, That gives us a little bit of time. But when you make your posters or flyers, allow 1.5 hours with an anticipated 64 minutes of actual time being used. Does that make sense, everybody? Give me a high five if that makes sense. And we're ready for the next slide. Ooh, this is exciting. It's the day of the event and we're ready to go. The candidates are putting on their best ties and jackets and they're ready to go. Make sure and email and call all of your setup helpers and your timekeepers, your moderators, and the candidates that today's the day. Give them the time and the location of the event. Make sure and tell them arrive a half hour before the event. The setup people need to arrive about an hour and a half before the event. The timekeepers and the moderator just need to arrive a half hour before the event. Make sure that everybody knows the location, everybody knows where parking is, and everybody has the coordinators. That's you. You are the candidate forum coordinator. Make sure they have your telephone number. Let everybody know where parking is and ask the candidates if they need table space for their brochures. Next slide, please. Okay, we want to make this space comfortable for our guests. How do we make it comfortable for them? Well, we might have pen or paper there if they want to make notes of their candidates' comments. Do we want to have some refreshments, some Twinkies and Kool-Aids? Do our guests need hearing devices? If they're non-English speakers, do they need interpreters and headsets? Okay. Provide voter registration forms at your forum if it's before October 20th, 2014. And remember that if someone fills out a voter registration form, they have 3 days to deliver the card to the Register of Voters office, or you can call your League of Women Voters and drop the cards off to them. Let them know if they're filling out a new voter registration card, if they've moved in the last year, that the ballot is not forwarded to their new address, and that they need to fill out a new voter registration card. Other things to make your guests feel comfortable is put some balloons at the curb. Make sure that there's a greeter outside the door if it's a hard to find location, and make sure that there is someone inside the door. So as soon as people arrive, they know what to do. Where do I go? Do I pick up a bottle of water? Do I pick up a card? Make sure and direct them. Hello, thank you for attending our voter forum. Would you like to pad and paper? We have refreshments here. Our candidates have brochures here. We have plenty of seating in the front of the room. Next slide, please. This is a lot of details that I'm giving you. And if you're not taking notes, you can always, and you're overwhelmed on how to start, you can partner with the League of Women Voters. They have years of experience. They've done this for years and years, and they can provide you with your timekeepers. They can help you with the questions or moderators. If you partner with the League, they will help you do everything. They'll even bring their stopwatch. So have a card that reads 1 minute on purple paper. Let's see, a 30-second card on yellow paper, and a red card that reads your time's up on red paper. So if they don't have their stopwatch and flashcards with them, you can make these yourself. But the League of Women Voters is well-respected, nonpartisan, and available to help you in any way that you need. Next slide, please.
In Veda, before we move to the next slide, I just want to describe the two images on this slide here. One is the logo of the League of Women Voters, and the other one is a logo for Making Democracy Work.
Yes, at the League of Women Voters, we don't care who you vote for, just as long as you participate in the process. So thank you very much for allowing me to share this information with you on setting up a forum. By now you should know the difference between a debate, a candidate forum, and a candidate meet and greet. Here's a shopping list for you on this page. This is everything that you need. You need cards, pencils, refreshments, hearing devices, stopwatch, your cards that display stop, 1 minute or 30 seconds. You'll also want to have table tents for your candidates, tables and chairs, and then I've left this other special needs box available for you to think about your audience. Think about your audience and think what they need. Will they need special transportation? So do they require a bus to pick them up and bring them to your location? And there's one area that I didn't talk to you about, and that's media. Make sure that you have someone create a beautiful flyer, or just doesn't even have to be beautiful, and just as long as the information is written down legibly, clear with a date, time, location, which race it is, and that you're holding a candidate forum, not a debate. So you can post those on Facebook. If you have a Twitter account, you can tweet those, and make sure and partner with other organizations like the League of Women Voters, other community nonprofits like here we have something called Marin Grassroots, which encompasses anyone with disabilities, people from other countries that speak other languages. So make sure and include everyone so that you can have a packed house to make it worthwhile as you present this nonpartisan event for everyone to participate. Thank you very much. And again, my name is Veda Florez.
All right, Veda, thank you so much. And now we're going to open the floor to questions. So I know that folks are going to have questions for Veda. If you're on the telephone line, you can press *6 to unmute your phone. And if you're on the webinar system, you just press that little talk button in the top left corner. And don't forget to press it again when you're done asking your question.
The guy on the phone wants to ask a question. Okay, now I've done candidate forums too, and I did mine at the CDR office. We weren't quite as elaborate as what you guys did, and yes, you're right about the League of Women Voters. We have an excellent person here at the League who helps us very much. My question is, do you have to say outright that they can't endorse? A lot of the nonprofits are probably on this call here, or organizations are just strictly 501c3s or the 501c4s, and they can't endorse. You have to. Have you had that happen that they say, well, I'm not sure what we're doing here at this forum here if you can't endorse, even though you try to tell them it's an informational thing? We've had that happen here with CDR, that we said, well, we can't endorse. All we can do is just listen to you and take it back.
This is interesting, and this is a little bit of an advanced question.
As individuals for what's going on. What do you say about that?
Groups that are 501c4 have the opportunity to be advocates. If you are a 501c4, you can advocate for a position or a candidate, but you have to tell people that in advance. So that's if the organization chooses to endorse a candidate. And it's better to do that afterwards, you know, in any written paperwork or press releases that you might have. The DO Network held a nonpartisan event, and we've chosen to endorse candidate Roosevelt because of his, you know, positions on housing, water, and transportation. The DO Network is a 501c4 organization, so it's right out there in paper so everyone knows that you're within your legal standing. If you are creating a 501c3 total nonpartisan event, then you can even put it on a table tent right at the front of the door, saying, "We do not support one candidate. This is just an informational event." So it's better to come out straight in front and tell people what the organizer's position is. Those who attend can have a position one way or another, and you can politely say, this is a nonpartisan event like you've done. We choose to keep our opinions to ourselves, and we're happy to discuss it after the event. And mainly because the candidates are on such limited, tight time schedules, we don't have time to go into, you know, specifically talking about that event, and you can ask them to stay afterwards and, you know, hold a roundtable discussion if you want to go into those details. So has your experience been that your organizers or your attendees have want to endorse?
For us, we're a 501c3 and a 501c4 because we do lobbying, and what's happened is I've been told. So I would like to. So that would be a good time to ask for this now. We've had it before as a 501c3, as a 501c3 entity. Now my question is, we're also a 501c4. Does that mean we can endorse a candidate? Because Older Women's League is also a 501c3, and they can't do it. And other organizations I've been with, they can't endorse a candidate because they're 501c3. So does the 501c4 give them the right to endorse
really
a candidate one or the other, and make a recommendation?
Mainly, when you hold your candidate forum, you have to determine in advance whether you're C3 or C4. You have to determine, are we going to hold a nonpartisan, non-endorsing event, or are we going to endorse a candidate? And just make that distinction from the very beginning so everyone is on the same page. I can send you information, you know, and we can pick up this discussion outside this forum if you want to go into more detail.
Great. And this is Ted. We only have time for one more question from another person, but to cap off what Veda just told you all, you know, there is a great resource in Alliance for Justice. If you go to allianceforjustice.org, they've got some great resources on the differences between what the two different types of nonprofits can do, a 501c3 or a 501c4. But you should also consult your own legal advice from your own organization to make that determination. So do we have Dolores on the line with us? Great. Welcome, Dolores. How are you today?
Yes, I am here.
Great. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So we are going to ask folks to mute their phones by pressing *6 or make sure that the talk button on your webinar system is not pressed. And I'm going to let Dolores take it away and talk to us about how to make our event accessible.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for having me. So I just want to talk about a couple things. And so what does accessibility kind of mean? I think we all have at least a legal understanding of the legal definition of what accessibility means and why that's important from a legal standpoint. But also really understanding that accessibility is a really good way to promote your organization, promote your event, and to really make sure that it's a welcoming space so that everybody can feel comfortable, and that ultimately is a benefit to your event. Another benefit of having an accessible space is obviously the more people that are able to be in that space, the more people you will have turn out. So you want to make sure that you offer a lot of different ways and make sure that your event is accessible in a lot of different ways so that folks, like I said, can be really comfortable and excuse me, and can make sure that they're participating in the event. Space, and you're giving people choices on how they can participate, they are more likely to participate and feel more welcomed. So what does accessibility really look like? There's a couple different things, and there is a accessibility checklist that I kind of that is a previous resource that I kind of added to and edited a bit, and I think Ted sent that out, or will be sending it out afterwards. So that checklist is very, I believe it's very simple. Once you do it once, it becomes easier and easier and kind of second nature. So I really encourage people to think about the checklist in advance and go through it with the understanding that maybe you won't get everything right, but if you try to at least meet the needs of folks with disabilities, that every time after that, it'll just become easier and easier. So accessibility, if we go through the checklist, really is a way for excuse me, for you to make sure you have all your bases covered.
The checklist was sent out to everyone.
Do folks have the checklist in front of them, Ted? Or are you going to send it out afterwards? Okay, cool. So if folks really quickly want to grab that and open it up to read, that'd be really great. If not, I'll just keep moving, and you can look at it later. And also know that the checklist is the way. It's not something that you have to take on alone. It is something that you should discuss with. You should discuss with the folks that you're collaborating with, and really split up those responsibilities. And if you're doing the event with organizations that aren't disability focused, then it's a really good way for them to begin to understand what some of the needs are for people with disabilities, and for them to better serve folks with disabilities that they encounter through their organizations and their work. So another thing is that the accessibility checklist can also be done by some volunteers. There's a lot of great things on there that volunteers can really take the lead on, and some tasks that can be assigned to volunteers. And you know, in terms of lists and resources, there's the list that I sent out, but there's also your own personal experience is a great resource to think about. You know, when you've gone to a candidates forum or a similar event, what were some things that you noticed that you wish could have been done to make it more comfortable for you to attend as a person with a disability? So start thinking about it in your own terms. So I'm going to talk more about creating a step-free environment on the next slide, but some of the other things you want to think about is in terms of the accessibility kind of mandated or required that you want to try to meet. You want to think about ASL accommodations and making sure that the venue that you're going to have your at is accessible. So that may mean you take a trip down to the suggested venue. And I've definitely had the personal experience of going to a venue and saying, you know, this isn't going to exist we can think of, so the other thing is that since you want to make sure before you release the flyer that everything is kind of in place, that you know that the space itself is going to be accessible. That way, once you release the advertising, people understand and people are more welcoming, and they kind of entrust you to know that it's going to be an accessible event. In terms of the building, I think there's some basic things that we all have an understanding of that are also on this checklist to make sure of, including that it's accessible, that it's there's no steps, or that if there is steps, there's a ramp in the entrance, that the doorways are wide enough, pathways are clear and unobstructed by tables, chairs, boxes, things like that. I know sometimes we've had our events at a union hall, or we've had our event at a church, and sometimes those spaces can become a little crowded. So if there are things there, and that's a really good reason to go to the space before, because you can ask the person who owns that space, hey, do you think we could move these boxes to the back corner, or is there another closet? Can I help you? Can we get some volunteers here so that we can have this space as open as possible? And also an accessible restroom is really, really important. And also, if the accessible pathway into the building is the alternative path or not very clear, to make sure there's some clear signs to indicate where the accessible entrance is, or that there's folks outside, greeters, volunteers, who are able to help people navigate the space as they come in. In terms of attendees, you want to make sure that it's a set-free environment. A lot of organizations and a lot of candidates aren't familiar with this type of standard that I know people with disabilities are as used to. So you want to make sure that you have the proper verbiage and, on the flyer. And that you're also letting candidates know and the organizations know that they want to promote this as well, so you don't want them to wear any scented products. And in terms of thinking about the attendees as well, is that it's close to public transit or transportation options, and I know Veda mentioned that a little bit earlier. I always like to have an event within 2 or 3, 4 at the most blocks from some sort of transit center or hub, because that's kind of in my experience, the capacity that folks are willing to walk. if it's a little bit further than the trainer, that to get it closer, to get there closer. And I've even been able to try to work out carpools or collaborating with a paratransit company to be able to provide a shuttle. So there's a little bit more work that goes into that, but the easiest thing is just to make sure that it's really close to a transit hub. And something that I've done in the past as well is provided people with the bus ticket to attend. So if someone is really interested in attending, maybe there's some bus tickets or some fares that your organization can sponsor, by buying bus tickets, you can give them the bus ticket, and once they know that that's settled, they're kind of really happy about that, and they're more committed to coming out. So that's a really good way to also ensure turnout. So I think we could move on to the second slide if we're not there yet. I don't have my job is not working, so I don't have it open. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about that's on this checklist is communication. So ASL interpreters, if they're requested, you want to make sure you have the right language on the flyer and in all communications and advertisings, so that people know to request them, to have large print materials. The standard is 14 point, but I like going a little bit bigger than that, and I think I think most of the time people don't have a problem if you go a little bit bigger. So other alternative formats include Braille and or PDF. So having Braille, I know, is really hard to come by, but if someone requested in advance, hopefully there's a way to meet that request. And a PDF is also a really great way, an alternative. And so asking someone if having the information on a CD for them to use or to look at before, or a disk drive, is really, really cool. And in terms of the spacing as well, the aisles where attendees are sitting should be, so now we're going to start thinking about kind of the day of. The aisles where people are sitting should be wide enough for wheelchairs, and so when we're thinking about chairs, my kind of standard is like I want to have as little chairs out as possible, and then have volunteers bring out chairs if more chairs are needed. There's been events that I've gone to where there's 100 chairs out and 20 people show up, and it just looks really bad. So if you start with 10 chairs or spaces for 20 people, then once those fill out, it looks way more full, way more encouraging, and you can bring out extra chairs as needed. One of the really cool things that I like to do that I think is really useful to think about is that folks who use wheelchairs or they use walkers and maybe sit on their walker instead of they have a seated walker and sit there, or they have a scooter. One of the things that I really like doing is setting up the room so that there's space everywhere, so they have options of where to sit. And one of the ways that I do that is I create alternative seats in each aisle. So the first row will have 5 seats in it, or 5 chairs in it, I should say, and then the end spaces are a little bit wider, and then the row behind that will have 8 chairs, and then the third row will have 4 chairs with space at the end. So people in wheelchairs can decide if they want to sit in the front row, that there's space up there for them to sit in the front row. And so I really like doing that because I think it spaces the room out a little bit better, and it provides people with a little bit more options of where they can sit. So one of the other things that I really want to talk about as well is making sure that people who speak say their name each time before they speak. And this is a really good way to make sure that people are following the conversation. And this is also a really hard one because people are very they may not understand this all the time, but it's something that should be super clear with the candidates. And candidates kind of love saying saying their own name in a way, and they'll find creative ways to kind of throw it in there into what they're talking about. But each time when the candidates are answering the question again, they should be able to say their name. And it's also really useful too, because depending on how the moderator is asking questions, each time it may be that they go in a different order. So it's really useful for people to especially those who aren't as familiar with the candidates, to follow along the conversation. One of the other things is to make sure that speakers aren't speaking too quickly, so that the conversation can be really followed. And lastly, that people should really use a microphone. Even the audience, when asking a question, a lot of people will say, my voice is loud enough, and oh, they can hear me in the back, I'm sure. But you just kind of want to be firm and say, no, we're really asking everyone to use the microphone so that everyone can make sure they hear you better. And if you leave it up to the crowd, what I've seen is that if some people say, oh yeah, we can hear you in the crowd, you don't need the mic, that they're going to not want to use the mic. But there's always someone in the room afterwards who's like, I couldn't hear them, I wish they would have used the mic, but they didn't want to necessarily speak up and ask for that. So you just want to make sure that you set that standard from the beginning, and you make sure that you pass the mic along. And if you can have 2 mics, that's awesome. And it does get what they think is tedious to continuously pass the mic, but it's just really, really helpful for the audience. And that's definitely who you should be catering to at these events, so that you make sure they get as much information as possible. Some other random things that I thought of when doing an event is some things that we normally don't necessarily think about, but that I've encountered. Excuse me. And some of those are straws for refreshments. And this, I think, is actually an accessibility thing as well, because there are some people, if you're going to have refreshments, who utilize straws when they're drinking. So I always make sure that I have straws for refreshments so that everyone has the opportunity to enjoy the beverages that you're offering. Some plastic cutting knives for food. That's also a basic thing, to make sure that if you have some appetizers, that folks are able to have some knives to just cut it apart and eat whatever you have out there more easily. And lastly, this is also something that Veda talked about, but assistance to help with activities such as writing. So volunteers work really well for this, and it's just someone who is able to offer to help if someone wants help writing something, or if someone wants to, maybe phrase their question and have you take notes for them, or whatever that may look like, that someone is willing to write it down. And the kind of standard that I use is that I just have volunteers ask every person when they're handing them the comment or the question card by saying, do you need help writing this? And if they ask that across the board to everybody, then folks are more likely to say, like, yeah, actually, I'm not really up for writing right now, or can you please write it down for me, or whatever it may be. And so folks are really appreciative when you offer to give them a hand that way. And then some of the more kind of basic accessibility things, again, on the second slide. We covered a lot of them, but on the second slide there's a lot more of the, I guess, formalized list for you to look at and to have. There's also a really great set-free environment verbiage there that you can put on your flyer or on emails or wherever it may be, and that's a really good addition to make sure to have on there, so that folks can have a set-free space. There's also a reasonable accommodations request phrase there that you also want to put on your flyer, or on any emails or anything that you're doing to advertise your event. So I think that's
folks,
pretty much it for
this
me.
is a good time to ask questions for Dolores, or any questions left over from Veda. Again, press *6 to unmute your phone, or you can press the talk button to activate your headset microphone to ask questions on the webinar system. And we have a few minutes for questions now.
We had a candidate forum, and our candidate forum was held at Peace Action. our candidate forum was, it was kind of like, it was a meeting room, so it wasn't all that accommodating. So that was the thing of it is, how soon should you inform the building that you need a reasonable accommodation? And two, how soon do you need an RSVP from those who are attending that they need a reasonable accommodation? Because some things take longer than others. I can tell you in Sacramento, we had to have NorCal Center on Deafness come in and do the signing for us, and we also had to get materials in other formats. So what was the timeline that you had to make sure that all these things were done when you had your forum?
Okay, so in terms of an accessible space or a meeting space, sometimes we don't have the option of switching the location. So as soon as you know, or those barriers kind of arise, you want to make sure, if it's not your space, that you let the building know that there is some things that should be changed. Maybe there's some tables that need to be removed, or something like that. And so you want to do that as soon as you're trying to confirm the space. For me, that usually looks, depending on how big I plan on having the event be, it could be anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months in advance. But you definitely want to do it before you start advertising the event. And so the second question about RSVPing, so when folks are RSVPing to you, I heard kind of two sides to this question. The first thing is that if you already are promoting this as an accessible event, you want to make this as accessible as possible, if there's some sort of materials that the candidates have, you want to make sure that you ask them to bring accessible materials along as well, and they may ask you what that means. So you'll want to let them know, usually things should be in 14-point font, Arial font or bigger. Having alternative formats like Braille or things on a disk drive or a CD are also really great. If you want to send me the email, I can send it out to some people who have already confirmed and want materials that way. Maybe not necessarily, and you want to make sure that you have, if you're going to send out an email with candidate information, that you're kind of doing it across the board. I kind of want to say don't send out any candidate information, leave that up to them, but confirm with the individual who's requesting that information that you can pass it along to the candidates so that they can forward their own information to that individual. That's probably your best bet. And so that's one side of it, is making sure that you help every candidate if they ask for that assistance on how to make sure that they can distribute accessible information and have accessible information at the event. And then, so the second piece of that is, when someone RSVPs with you, the standard for a reasonable accommodation request is usually within 5 days or earlier before the event. It is usually harder to meet an accommodation request with less than 5 business days. And so usually folks who know that they're going to need an accommodation request it fairly early, as soon as they RSVP. And so you want to make sure that you have all your accommodation needs met within at least, I would say, 3 days. So you give yourself a 2-day leverage after the closing of the, after you stop receiving accommodations requests. Give yourself at least 2 days to get all of them in place. Usually what I do is I have a list of things like ASL interpreters or a translation equipment or headsets to listen in more closely. I have those folks kind of on standby. So I let them know that we're doing an event, and I say, hey, can we borrow this equipment? Or with the ASL interpreters, I say, hey, we're doing this event. Here's the date. What's your availability? If someone requests ASL, I'll make sure to confirm with you by such and such date, or as soon as they let me know, to kind of get all those things in place. And so once you have ASL interpretation in place, you do want to make sure that you call the person.
All right, folks, I'm just going to remind everyone that if you're not speaking on the phone, please mute your phone by pressing *6. So we have one more short section to go through, but we do have time for one more question. So is there anyone else that has a question for Dolores or or Veda? Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and move on to one last final section, and we're going to talk about resources that you may want to access when putting on your voter education candidate or community forum. We're going to talk first about the Secretary of State's website. So on the Secretary of State's website, there are some resources available to you. First off is the official California Voter Information Guide. And you can, the website is on here, voterguide.sos.ca.gov. By the way, all of these websites and their web addresses are listed in the rich text outline that was sent out to everyone who's on the webinar today. So you have these links in there. The official voter guide comes in many different alternate formats. You can have the guide, you can order it to be delivered to you, and you may want to have several of those on site there at your forum. There's also a short version of it called A Guide to Voting in California, My Voice, My Choice, My Vote, and you can get that by calling the Secretary of State's office or ordering it online in their online order form. And then there's also just a general information flyer as well called Vote in 2014 that you can get from the Secretary of State's office. You can also look up the qualified ballot measures. There's the link there, and this, the Secretary of State does post all of the ballot measures that qualified for the ballot. They're, obviously in the legal language and everything, so they're going to be a little bit wordy, and sometimes they're a little bit complicated, but we're going to talk in just a moment about another place you can get them in an easier format to look at. And then the Secretary of State's office also has a page for voters with disabilities that has a wide range of information from the Voter Accessibility Advisory Committee to the different links to the different accessible machines that are used in each county, as well as ordering your voter education materials in alternate formats like audio cassette, CDs, or downloading them on MP3s, or being able to visually watch the voter guide in American Sign Language. That's all on their website. And there is an alternate formats order form. By going to the Voters with Disabilities page, you can click on the order form and it will take you there. You can also access that from the first link at the top there, the California Voter Information Guide. And of course, as I did mention, the accessible voting machines. Now, there are some great resources out there for us as well from the League of Women Voters. And on this page, we've got some logos. We've got the logo of the Do Network, and then some other graphics that we have is the Smart Voter logo and the Easy Voter Guide logo. Resources from the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters does a great job of presenting resources for us on the local and the statewide level. On the local level, there's a website called Smart Voter. I love Smart Voter. It's really easy to remember. It's just www.smartvoter.org. And on that particular website, you can actually go in and put in your zip code, your address, and it will pop up everything that's going to be on your ballot and information about that. So where other resources might have broader information like statewide ballot initiatives, candidates that are running for governor, all of that, Smart Voter is going to tell you the ballot initiatives governor, but it's also going to tell you things like who's running for dog catcher. It's really down to the local level. And then on a statewide level, there's the Easy Voter Guide. I personally have used the Easy Voter Guide for years, both in my campaigns, but also for myself personally. This is going to be a great place for you to get information about the ballot initiatives in plain language that is understandable. And you can go to easyvoterguide.org to see it online, or you can go to the website there to order an Easy Voter Guide mailed out to you, and maybe multiple copies if you're doing a candidate forum or a community forum around voting. And you can also check out the Do Network and the resources that we're going to have. Our website is disabilityorganizing.net. Already there are some voting resources like these webinars and training opportunities posted on that website, as well as our election summits that are coming up. We're going to be having summits in Sacramento on September 22nd at the Secretary of State's office, and then we're going to have one in Oakland on September 25th and one in Pasadena in Southern California on September 29th. And you can go to disabilityorganizing.net, and right at the top on the home page there's a button to press. It'll take you to a page that will tell you all about the summits, and you can register. So I would highly recommend going to that today. You can also check us out on Facebook, www.facebook.com/donetwork.org. And on our Facebook page, we post everything. We have a lot of likes, a lot of followers, and a lot of our information around elections and voting is on the Facebook page. And then you can follow us on Twitter. On Twitter, our handle is @donetwork.org. There's no dot between work and org, so it's just @donetwork.org. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget that the Disability Organizing Network does have a training library. The archived webinar from today's webinar is being recorded, and it will be up in about 7 to 10 business days on our website. To view it there or to tell your friends who may want to watch it in about 7 to 10 days, they just go to disabilityorganizing.net, click on the Trainings and Events tab at the top, and then click on the Training Archive Library. And there's a link right there. And again, you have this link in the materials that I sent to you, and that will take you directly to the archived library. And before we end today, please take our survey. We really appreciate your participation in today's webinar. And we would really appreciate if you would share your experience with us by completing the survey. Your feedback is highly valued, and participation is greatly appreciated for our future webinar opportunities. Well, thank you all very much. Keep an eye out for our future webinars and our events this election season. We've got a lot planned for you. And remember, the Disability Organizing Network is dedicated to organizing for accessible communities where we live, work, learn, shop, play, and vote. Thank you very much, and have a great day.